It's not often you get active members of political parties being publicly frank, even scathing, about the weaknesses and failings of their party. Rodney Cavalier, a former education minister in the Rann and Unsworth governments, now a Labor historian, has just published a book, The Power Crisis, the Self-Destruction of a State Labor Party. Stateline detected both sorrow and anger as the author exposed the destabilising split in the once all-powerful New South Wales branch over former Premier Morris Yema's plan to privatise the electricity industry in 2008. Mr Yema's premiership was destroyed after he defied the binding power of State Labor's annual conference and his own membership pledged to abide by the rules and platform of the party. After the reverses Labor suffered at the federal election in August, there's now an internal inquiry into the Labor Party. Rodney Cavalier's book may emerge as Exhibit A in what has become known as New South Wales disease, poll-driven, dump the leader, ruthless expediency.
So, there is the book. And it's written and published at a time when the party is in crisis. In many ways, this wonderful night tonight, which is the launch, was preceded by a bigger launch on the 21st of August, when the whole world became aware that the party has a problem of belief, a crisis of belief, a crisis of stating what it stands for.
Rodney Cavalier's book, Power Crisis, was launched by Senator John Faulkner, recently appointed by the ALP National Executive to find out what went wrong after the party's drubbing in the August federal election. The terms of reference may have to be extended to take into account the party's expected loss of government in New South Wales next March.
In this book, he focuses on what has come to be called in the media the New South Wales disease, the churn and burn of political leaders, the perceived short-term focus on polling and the relentless tactical battle for day-by-day advantage in the media, and the endless, constant politics of spin.
Rodney Cavalier was a Labor lefty, but as Education Minister in the Rann and Unsworth governments, he often clashed with the powerful New South Wales Teachers Federation. After he lost his seat in 1988, he retreated to Bowral, where he became a prolific writer and diarist of Labor Party history. His book, which canvasses the destructive split over electricity privatisation, does not hold back about his old faction, which, he says, enjoys all the spoils of high office without any intellectual effort.
In the 1980s, the left was utterly routed in the battle of ideas. The ALP suffers from the absence of a left. Without one, there is no opposition to what rapidly becomes the conventional wisdom. Dissent is stilled. In the absence of a left, a vast territory has been forfeited for the Greens to occupy. In the inner cities, the Greens are stalking Labor.
It is an absolute joke.
But in the 2008 electricity privatisation dispute, opposition to Morris Yema and Michael Costa's plan came from their own right faction MPs, still loyal to the party's conference and its trade union base. Rolled by the conference, Morris Yema and Michael Costa both soon resigned and left the parliament. The sorrow in Mr Cavalier's book is apparent, not just over this, but in his observations about the disempowered and alienated remnants of Labor's rank-and-file membership.
At a time when the active membership of the party is fewer than 1,000, when the book membership is only 15,500. In 1911, the membership of the Labor Party, the League membership, not affiliated unions, the membership of the Labor Leagues, the branches across New South Wales stood at 92,000. And that's out of a much smaller population, and I dare say 50,000 plus would have been active. There's 15,400 today. Matters have gone horribly, horribly wrong. The party must change.
Rodney Cavalier, welcome to Stateline. In a nutshell, for our viewers who haven't read your book, what's wrong with the Labor Party?
Well, the party is suffering, as we speak, in October 2010 from a crisis of belief, crisis of values, a serious loss of a moral compass. It cannot state what it believes in because there's difficulty working out what it believes in.
Because it's too busy chasing power?
Well, Paul Keating puts it well, it's become power for power's sake. That's an observation of his and a phalanx of people. It's very difficult to go to the core of what Labor stands for in government anywhere in Australia.
You attack the left, we've just run that few paragraphs, as bereft of ideas while enjoying the spoils of office. But while you've been sitting there at the Sydney Cricket Ground Trust and down at Barrel writing all these prolific confidential newsletters, what did you do over the last 10 years to warn the party that all the Labor left support was going to the Greens? Well,
the left, in any meaningful sense, in an ALP context, came to an end in 1989. In the case of the New South Wales left, on the same night, the exact same night as the Berlin Wall fell. With that, it was the death of socialism and the end of one of the polar disciplines of world politics. The great divide between left and right was essentially at an end. So it had to be a very serious redefining. Without socialism, there was no binding cause to hold the left together. And so the faction split. It split very badly, and it is split further with factions having sub-factions, and within the sub-factions there are tendencies. And they have all the apparatus of discipline and special and secret meetings as the Labor Party itself. My question was, what did you do? I know you're an active member of the party. What did you do? Well, if you're asking me to plead guilty to doing nothing, I plead guilty. I was living my life back to front. I went out of Parliament in 88, the left split in 89, and I sought happiness personally. I have children, I live in a wonderful part of the world, and I have...
we're going to burst into tears. But you pleaded guilty to inaction.
Inaction, if you don't regard being the secretary of a branch, being the president of a branch, and producing 167 issues of a newsletter.
You've been prolific, I acknowledge that. The Greens are now in effective coalition with the Gillard minority government federally, and it looks like the Greens will win some lower house city seats in the state election next year. A lot of the trade unions already support the Greens. Is it perhaps time for the Labor Party, valueless as you now say it is, to think about shutting up shop to disband?
Well, there's, of course, been a long school of thought that perhaps the Labor Party project has come to an end. I have been appalled to hear the word brand applied to Labor. The Labor brand's in trouble.
Well, it's a marketing term that's just modernist, I know.
But it's been unchallenged, and I challenge it. Labor is a project. Labor is a mission. I quote Harold Wilson, either we are a crusade or we are nothing. We're certainly not a crusade.
Well, it's not a crusade over global warming or the green politics, which is what the Greens have benefited from. If global warming is a game changer for economics and the environment, don't you need a party to get ahead of that game and lead that change?
Well, that's a big if. And
You're a sceptic?
I've always been a sceptic about the politics of climate change. I have not yet seen a world leader commit to anything substantive in the life of the Parliament or Congress or presidency in which they're serving.
Putting a lot of conditions around
it. It is a hugely heroic thing to set up big targets for 2020 or 2030. I'm interested in targets in this Parliament for 2013. So I'm sceptical that anyone will put at risk the re-election of a government by being heroic.
My question was the desertion, the context of it is the desertion of Labor supporters to the Greens, particularly young people, I think, after Kevin 07's effective abandonment of commitment to the ETS.
Yeah, the Greens support among people under 19 to 35, is very impressive. The absence of young people from the Labor Party is stark. And I've challenged hundreds of people who are at the other end of my emails or newsletter, please report in someone young, not on the payroll, handing out for the Labor Party. No one has been able to meet that challenge. We are a party that's ageing. My own life tells that. When I joined the Hunters Hill branch in 1968, I was the youngest member of the branch. When I went into Parliament 10 years later, I was among the youngest members of the branch. When I came out 10 years later, I was still among the youngest members of the branch. When I went to Southern Highlands in 1992, all of 44, I was among the youngest members of the branch. And here I am, 18 years later, in my 60s, I'm among the youngest members of the branch. The branch, the Labor Party, that has aged around me.
And you've got an index at the back of the book where more than 100 branches have closed over the last 10 years.
We have an appendix at the end of the book, 3 appendixes, which deal with some pretty stark numbers.
I know John Faulkner and the National Executive will look at it, and I'm sure the whole of Australia will look at this to see where the politics of this country go. You say in this book your party must change. After this split over electricity privatisation, which you deconstruct right through the narrative, the New South Wales branch of the party is clearly still owned and controlled by the trade unions. Should union control now be broken?
Well, I've been advocating that since '79. Yes, union control must be broken. The proportion on the floor of conference must be moved way below 50. In my time, it's gone from 73 to 60 and down to 50, thanks to Simon Crean. 50 and 60 make no difference.
Yeah, 40... but what's going to come in with the vacuum that is created as a consequence of that?
But let me just finish my point. You have to get down to something matching the size of the unions in the electorate, about 8%, somewhere between 8 and 20%. What will come in with the vacuum? I'm hoping there'll be such a blast of oxygen, the very people you are deploring the absence of will rejoin. I think one of the things we can do is...
On what grounds would they rejoin?
I believe that if we reconstruct the party, and the words in much of the platform, they're good words. The policies we stand for are often good. They're not matched by actual deeds. I am confident if the parliamentary parties were answerable to the membership instead of being spaceships free to roam the galaxies without any real recourse in the absence of pre-selection ballots, there would be a better party in Parliament and beyond.
Let me ask you...
You don't have a reason to belong. You don't have a reason to belong if you don't have a say in either policy or candidate selection.
You don't want to get rid of the annual conference's binding power over policy and platform.
No, I don't.
OK, and you don't want to get rid of the pledge on individual MPs, more importantly MPs, which Morris Yemma defied when he moved to privatise electricity.
I don't want to get rid of the pledge.
So two ideas...
And if Morris was here now, he would talk about that. That was a question I put to him. The answer's in the book. He doesn't believe he went to the ultimate step. Now, this is the hardest part of the whole book to write, because between when I started and when I finished, Morris and I became friends, and that altered in many ways the entire chemistry of the book. I enjoin your viewers to read that section. So
you assert that he wasn't, deliberately defiant, even though he knew that he was going to get rolled at the conference and that the party had binding power over him.
Morris kept on thinking, and those around him gave him poor advice, that there would be a compromise in the last ditch, that one or the Libs would get him out of the problem. None of that came to pass. He says that he was conscious at every moment of the membership of the Beverly Hills branch, the only branch to which he's belonged. I believe him on that. He does have difficulty, however, squaring that with where we were going, and he's living with it in his own way.
Tell me, fundamentally, did you support the privatisation of the electricity industry?
In 1997, when Bob Carr and Michael Egan brought it there, I was prepared to vote yes. In 2000...
You did support it? You were prepared to support it?
I was prepared to support it. There was no vote. In 2008, I was so offended by the very point you've made that the government assumed that it could put this through, regardless of conference. I reckon a vote, a big defeat, probably 500-300, became a defeat of 700-100 because of people like me who were not going to be taken for granted. I said this to Morris at the time.
Finally, Mr Cavalier, the Premier, Christina Keneally, has taken offence at the book, particularly the cover, which has got a photograph of her on it, saying you only interviewed the blokes, Yemma and Nathan Rees, for this, and it's a sad commentary on how perhaps male politicians of his era, yours, Mr Cavalier, viewed women and what they've got to contribute to the political process. Why didn't you interview Christina Keneally? She supported privatisation. She was solidly with Morris Yemma all the way through.
If I can be forgiven for being bitchy, the book's not about Christina. It stops with the fall of Nathan. And I talked to a lot of people besides the two former premiers, and the book is about especially the events of 07, 08, 09, and Christina comes into it only as a phenomenon at conference and as the beneficiary of a power play that brought down Nathan. I think I had a perfectly good understanding of her motivation and what she did. It didn't need to be explained to me by her or anyone else.
And the publisher shouldn't have put her photo on the front page.
Well, I find that an amazing assertion. We're now going to have permission about covers on photographs of public figures.
Freedom of expression. Rodney Cavalier, thanks very much.
Thank you, Quentin.